The silver monitoring station hung in the darkness between stars like a giant metal flower. Inside its crystal chambers, 12 different alien species watched the screens that showed thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Each screen glowed with the light of civilizations that were still learning to walk among the stars. Observer Zethkar moved his 4 arms across the control panels with practiced ease. His insect-like head turned toward the screen, showing a small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked peaceful from space, covered in swirling white clouds and vast oceans that reflected the light of its sun. Third planet, system designation Sol 3. Zethkar spoke into his communication device. His voice made clicking sounds that the universal translator changed into words the other council members could understand. All readings normal for the past solar cycle. The blue world had been on their watch list for only a short time. The species living there had just discovered how to split atoms and had begun sending primitive signals into space. The council always watched worlds like this carefully. Some species learned wisdom with their new power. Others destroyed themselves. A few became dangerous to everyone else. Zethkar was about to move to the next screen when something changed. Deep beneath the waters of the blue world, energy readings began to spike. The numbers on his instruments climbed higher than they should for such a young civilization. Far below on the planet's surface, Dr. Jake Martinez checked his equipment one more time. The research vessel Deep Explorer rocked gently on the Pacific. Ocean waves 20 miles from the nearest land. Jake had spent 5 years planning this expedition to the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. "Lisa, are you getting clear readings from the submersible?" Jake called to his chief engineer. Lisa Thompson looked up from her control station and nodded. "Everything looks good down there, Jake. Nick is about 2 miles down now, right on target for the coordinates." In the small submarine Sea Wanderer, geologist Nick Carter guided his craft through the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. Powerful lights cut through the water ahead of him, revealing the strange landscape of the ocean floor. He had been diving to deep places for 10 years, but this spot was different. The sonar readings showed something that should not exist here. "Jake, I'm approaching the anomaly now," Nick spoke into his radio. "The metal readings are off the charts. This thing is huge." Through the submarine's viewing window, Nick saw something that made him catch his breath. Rising from the ocean floor like a sleeping giant was a structure made of metal that gleamed silver blue in his lights. The metal was covered in patterns that looked almost like writing, but unlike any human language he had ever seen. "Jake, you need to see this. I'm sending video feed up now." On the surface, Jake and Lisa watched their screens in amazement. The structure stretched for hundreds of feet in every direction. It was clearly not natural, but it was also clearly not made by humans. The metal showed no signs of rust or damage, despite being under crushing water pressure. "How old do you think it is?" Lisa whispered. "Old," Jake replied. "Very old." Nick moved his submarine closer to the structure. As he approached, his instruments began detecting a faint energy signature coming from within the metal walls. The energy was unlike anything in Earth's technology. "I'm going to try to take a sample," Nick announced. He extended the submarine's mechanical arm and moved it toward a section of the structure that had what looked like symbols carved into the surface. The moment the mechanical arm touched the alien metal, everything changed. A pulse of energy shot through the structure, lighting up the patterns carved into its surface. The energy moved like liquid fire, racing along the metal pathways until the entire structure glowed with brilliant blue light. The pulse continued outward, spreading through the rock and metal of the ocean floor itself. Nick's submarine was thrown backward by the force of the energy wave. Alarm screamed in his ears as his instruments went wild. "Jake, something's happening down here." The whole thing just lit up like a Christmas tree. On the surface, Jake and Lisa felt the research vessel shake as the energy pulse reached them. Every piece of electronic equipment on the ship flickered and reset itself. The radio crackled with static and then fell silent. But the energy did not stop at the ocean's surface. It continued outward and downward, spreading through Earth's crust like ripples in a pond. Within minutes, the pulse had reached the planet's core, and from there, it spread to every corner of the world, high above the Earth. In the cold monitoring station between the stars, observer Zethkar watched his instruments in growing alarm. The energy readings from the blue world had jumped beyond anything he had ever seen from such a primitive civilization. War Commander Thekros, you need to see this immediately. Zethkar transmitted to the military section of the station. War Commander Thekros arrived within moments. His heavily armored body moved with surprising grace despite its bulk. His species had evolved from creatures that lived in the crushing depths of ocean worlds, and their natural armor had served them well in their rise to become one of the galaxy's premier military forces. "Show me," Thekros commanded. Zethkar pointed to the screen showing Earth. The energy signature just increased by a factor of 10,000. And War Commander, look at this pattern analysis. A second screen appeared, showing the energy pattern in detail. The waveforms and frequencies were displayed in colors that showed their intensity and structure. Thekros studied the patterns for a long moment. His face, hidden behind his natural armor plating, showed no emotion, but Zethkar could see the tension in his posture. "Observer, run a comparison analysis against the historical database. Check the energy signatures of known hostile species." Zethkar's 4 arms moved quickly across his controls. The computer began searching through millions of records from across the galaxy's history. Civilizations that had risen and fallen, species that had become threats to galactic peace, and energy signatures that marked the presence of dangerous technology. The results appeared on the screen within seconds, and both aliens stared at them in shock. Match found. Confidence level, 97%. Energy signature matches archived records of devourer technology. The devourers had been extinct for over 2 million years, but every species in the galaxy knew their story. They had started as a single-world civilization, much like the humans on the blue planet. But something had gone wrong with their development. Instead of joining the galactic community, they had become something else. Something that consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion across space. The Devourers had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy before the combined forces of 100 worlds had finally stopped them. But their technology had never been completely destroyed. Fragments of their weapons and artifacts still existed on dead worlds across space. "War Commander," Zethkar said quietly, "if the humans have found Devourer technology and activated it ... then we may be looking at the birth of the next galactic threat," Thekros finished. "Observer, I want continuous monitoring of that world. Any change, any new energy signature, any sign of expansion beyond their planet, and you notify me immediately." "Yes, War Commander." As Thekros left to report to the Council leadership, Zethkar turned back to his screens. The blue world continued to pulse with energy that matched the signature of humanity's ancient enemy. He watched the small planet with growing dread, wondering if they were witnessing the first moments of a new age of galactic war. On Earth, Nick Carter finally managed to regain control of his submarine. The alien structure had returned to its dormant state, but he could still feel energy humming through the water around him. Something fundamental had changed, not just in the deep ocean, but in the entire world above. He did not know that his simple attempt to take a sample had just marked humanity as the galaxy's newest threat. The changes began 3 days after the pulse. Dr. Jake Martinez noticed it first in the kelp forests near his research station. The massive underwater plants that usually took months to grow had added several feet of new growth in just 72 hours. The fish swimming among them moved with unusual coordination, almost as if they were communicating with each other in ways they never had before. "Lisa, come look at this," Jake called from his laboratory. He had samples of seawater under his microscope, and what he saw defied everything he knew about marine biology. Lisa Thompson joined him at the microscope and peered through the eyepiece. The tiny organisms in the water were not just more active than normal. They were working together, forming complex patterns that looked almost intentional. "This is impossible," Lisa whispered. "Plankton don't behave like this. They're acting like they have some kind of collective intelligence." Similar reports were coming in from research stations around the world. In the Amazon rainforest, trees were growing at 10 times their normal rate. In laboratories across 6 continents, scientists were reporting that their test animals had begun solving puzzles that should have been beyond their mental capabilities. But the most dramatic changes were happening to humans themselves. Dr. Grace Miller had been studying xenobiology at Harvard for 15 years. She was one of the world's leading experts on the possibility of life on other worlds. 3 days after the pulse, she woke up with ideas flooding her mind that she had never thought before. Complex mathematical equations appeared in her thoughts as clearly as if someone had written them on a blackboard dot. She was not alone. Around the world, humans were experiencing similar improvements in their thinking abilities. Artists found themselves creating masterpieces that surpassed anything they had done before. Engineers solved problems that had stumped them for years. Children in schools began asking questions that made their teachers realize how much more there was to learn about the universe. President Helen Brooks received the first reports about these changes during her morning briefing in the White House. Dr. Alan Price, the nation's top physicist, had been called in to explain what the government scientists had discovered. "Madam President, we're seeing measurable increases in cognitive function across the entire population," Dr. Price explained. "IQ scores have jumped an average of 30 points worldwide. Problem-solving abilities are through the roof. It's as if someone flipped the switch in the human brain." And this started right after the energy pulse that Dr. Martinez's team detected. President Brooks asked, "Yes, ma'am. We believe the two events are connected, though we don't understand how yet." What the humans did not know was that their activities were being watched with growing alarm from the monitoring station between the stars. Observer Zeth Carr had been tracking the changes on Earth for 3 days, and each new development confirmed his worst fears. "War Commander Thick Rose, the situation on the blue world is escalating," Zeth Carr reported. "The energy signatures are spreading across their entire planet, and they're beginning to modify their behavior patterns." Thick Rose studied the data that Zeth Carr had compiled. Satellite images from Earth showed increased activity at military bases around the world. Governments were clearly responding to the unknown energy source, though the aliens watching from space interpreted this very differently than the humans intended. "They're fortifying," Thekros concluded, "just like the historical records of devourer behavior. First the technology activates, then the species begins preparing for expansion." The misunderstanding deepened when President Brooks ordered the military to increase surveillance of the area where the pulse had originated. To the watching aliens, the movement of ships and aircraft toward the Pacific Ocean looked like the humans were securing their new weapon. "Observer, what's the status of their spaced assets?" Thekros asked. Zethkar-S instruments showed him the orbital activities around Earth. "They're launching additional satellites, or Commander. 3 new platforms went up yesterday, and there are more scheduled for this week." In reality, NASA was launching emergency monitoring satellites to study the energy pulse and its effects on Earth's magnetic field. The space agency wanted to understand what had happened and whether it posed any danger to the planet. But to the Galactic Council, the satellite launches looked like humanity was deploying weapon platforms in preparation for interstellar warfare. Breaking point came when aerospace engineer Roy Phillips and his team achieved a breakthrough that should have been impossible. Roy had been working on fusion drive technology for spacecraft for over a decade. The project had been stuck on the same problems for years, with no clear path to a solution. Then the pulse changed everything. "Janet, look at these calculations." Roy called to his assistant engineer. Janet Walsh joined him at his computer terminal, where Roy had been working for 18 straight hours. "These fusion equations," Roy continued, "I can see the solutions now. It's like someone turned on a light in my head. We can build this drive system, and we can build it now." Within days, Roy's team had constructed a prototype fusion drive that operated at efficiency levels far beyond anything in human technology. When they fired up the drive for its first test, the energy signature was detected by monitoring stations across 3 star systems. Observer Zith Carr watched the energy spike appear on his screens and felt his heart sink. The Blue World had just demonstrated weapons-grade technology that rivaled anything the Galactic Council possessed. "War Commander, they've activated some kind of planetary defense system," Zethkar reported. "The energy output suggests they now have the capability to strike targets across interstellar distances." Thek Rose studied the readings and came to the same conclusion that every military analyst in the Council would have reached. The humans had gone from a primitive civilization to a galactic threat in less than a week. The pattern matched the Devourer. Emergence exactly. "Observer, open a priority channel to Council Chancellor Mordith. Tell her we have a code-red situation developing in the Sol system." Chancellor Mordith was ancient, even by the standards of her gas-being species. She had lived through the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, and had been present during the final battle against the Devourers 2 million years ago. When she received Thek Rose's report, she knew exactly what they were facing. "How long do we have before they achieve interstellar capability?" she asked. "Based on Devourer historical patterns, perhaps months," Thek Rose replied. "But Chancellor, their development speed is accelerating. They went from first activation to planetary scale. Weapons in less than a week. We may have much less time than that." Chancellor Mordith made the decision that would have been obvious to any leader who had witnessed what the Devourers had done to the galaxy. "War Commander, assemble a strike fleet. 12 ships, 1 from each member species. We will resolve this threat before it can spread beyond their home system." "Yes, Chancellor. What are our rules of engagement?" "Total sterilization. We cannot allow even a fragment of Devourer technology to survive. The Blue World and everything on it must be destroyed." As the Council's military forces began preparing for humanity's destruction, the humans continued their rapid development, unaware that their improvements in science and technology were being interpreted as preparation for galactic conquest. Dr. Jake Martinez, still studying the alien structure beneath the Pacific Ocean, was beginning to understand that the device was some kind of communication beacon. He had no way of knowing that its activation had just marked his entire species for extinction. In research facilities around the world, human scientists were making breakthroughs that would have taken decades under normal circumstances. They were closer than ever to unlocking the secrets of the universe itself. They were also running out of time to prove they were not the monsters the galaxy believed them to be. The Council fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like 12 harbingers of death. Each ship represented a different member species of the Galactic Council, and together they carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. War Commander Thek Rose stood on the bridge of his flagship Harmony's Edge, studying the blue world that hung in the darkness ahead of them. "All ships report ready, War Commander," his communications officer announced. Maintain position at the system's edge, Thekros ordered. Begin deep-range scanning of the target world. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we move closer. On Earth, Dr. Beth Clark was working the late shift at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. She had been an astronomer for 20 years, and like everyone else on the planet, she had experienced the cognitive enhancement that followed the pulse. Her ability to interpret radio signals from space had improved dramatically, which was why she noticed the unusual readings appearing on her instruments. That's not natural, Beth muttered to herself as she studied the data. The radio emissions were too regular, too structured to be coming from any known astronomical phenomenon. They had the characteristics of artificial signals, but they were coming from multiple sources at the edge of the solar system. Beth picked up her phone and dialed the emergency contact number for NASA's Deep Space Network. This is Dr. Clark. At Arecibo. I need to speak to someone about possible contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, I'm sure. Within hours, the discovery had reached the highest levels of government around the world. President Helen Brooks convened an emergency meeting with world leaders through secure video links. Prime Minister Danny Foster of the United Kingdom, Chancellor Maria Schmidt of Germany, and leaders from dozens of other nations joined the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, President Brooks began, our astronomers have confirmed the presence of 12 artificial objects at the edge of our solar system. Based on their size and configuration, we believe they are spacecraft of unknown origin. What are their intentions? Asked Prime Minister Foster. We don't know, President Brooks replied. We're attempting to establish communication. The human attempts at communication began immediately. Radio telescopes around the world started broadcasting messages in hundreds of languages, along with mathematical concepts and scientific principles that any advanced civilization should understand. The messages were simple. We are peaceful. We welcome contact. We wish to learn. But to the Council fleet, these broadcasts looked like something entirely different. War Commander, the planet is transmitting complex data patterns across multiple frequencies, the fleet's communications specialist reported. The signals are designed to overload our communication systems and confuse our targeting computers. Thekros had seen this tactic before in the historical records of the Devourer Wars. The ancient enemy had used psychological warfare and electronic attacks to weaken their opponents before launching their devastating assaults. All ships implement communication blackout protocols, Thekros ordered. Do not respond to any transmissions from the target world. The Council's military doctrine for dealing with Devourer threats was clear and ruthless. Strike first, strike hard, and leave nothing that could regenerate or spread the infection to other worlds. Thekros had studied the doctrine his entire military career, and he followed it precisely. Target acquisition complete, his weapons officer announced. We have locks on their primary military installations and population centers. Begin the cleansing, Thekros commanded. The first strike hit a decommissioned nuclear facility in the Nevada desert. The Council had identified it as a weapons production center based on its residual radiation signature. The alien beam weapon turned sand into glass for miles around the impact site, creating a crater that glowed with residual energy. The second strike targeted what the Council believed was a research facility for biological weapons. In reality, it was Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which had been emitting unusual energy readings because its new experimental medical equipment had been enhanced by the same cognitive improvements affecting all human technology. Dr. Lisa Park was in the hospital's pediatric wing when the attack came. She had been working with enhanced medical scanners that could now detect diseases at the cellular level, a breakthrough that promised to save thousands of young lives. The blast vaporized the entire building and everyone inside it in a fraction of a second. News of the attacks spread around the world within minutes. President Brooks appeared on television to address the nation, her face pale but determined. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, we are under attack by forces we do not understand, but we will not surrender. We will not give up hope. We will find a way to survive this, and we will find a way to show these attackers that humanity deserves to exist. The third strike was aimed at Washington, D.C., which the Council had identified as the primary command center for Earth's military forces. But as the beam weapon charged for its killing shot, something happened that no one expected. Captain Amy Scott was flying an experimental fighter jet over the Capitol when her enhanced cognitive abilities allowed her to calculate the exact trajectory of the incoming alien weapon. She could see that the blast would destroy not just the government buildings, but hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians in the surrounding area. Amy had a split second to make a choice. She could try to evade the alien beam and save herself, or she could do something that might save others. She chose to save others. Amy turned her fighter jet directly into the path of the alien weapon beam. Her small aircraft could not stop the attack entirely, but it disrupted the beam's focusing system enough to scatter the energy across a much wider area. Instead of a concentrated blast that would have destroyed the entire city, the attack became a diffuse energy pulse that caused widespread power outages and some structural damage, but relatively few casualties. Amy Scott died instantly when her aircraft was vaporized by the alien weapon. But her sacrifice saved hundreds of thousands of lives. The act of self-sacrifice was witnessed by millions of people who had been watching the news coverage of the attack. Video of Amy's fighter jet diving into the alien beam spread across the eye. Internet and television networks around the world. But Amy's sacrifice did more than save lives in Washington. It did something that the Galactic Council had never seen before in their encounters with species infected by Devourer technology. War Commander. Observer Zethkar reported from the monitoring station. The humans are not responding to our attacks as predicted. Explain, Thekros demanded. According to Devourer behavioral patterns, they should be preparing retaliatory strikes against our fleet. Instead, they're directing their efforts toward protecting their civilian populations and helping the wounded. Thekros studied the data streaming in from Earth. Instead of mobilizing for war, humans around the world were rushing to help those affected by the attacks. Medical personnel were flying to the disaster sites from every continent. Engineers were working to restore power and communications. Military forces were being deployed not to launch attacks, but to coordinate rescue operations. Perhaps this is a deception? Thekros suggested. They may be preparing a surprise attack while appearing to focus on humanitarian efforts. But even as he said it, Thekros was beginning to doubt his assumptions. The Devourers had never shown concern for their own casualties, much less made efforts to help their wounded. The behavior patterns he was seeing from Earth did not match anything in the historical records. On Earth, the attacks had triggered something that the Council could never have predicted. Instead of dividing humanity, the alien assault had united the species in a way that no event in human history had ever achieved. People who had been enemies the day before were now working together to help the victims. Nations that had been on the brink of war were sharing resources and expertise. The cognitive enhancements that all humans now possessed were being focused not on weapons development, but on medical care, infrastructure repair, and protection. Of the innocent Dr. Jake Martinez, still studying the alien beacon beneath the Pacific Ocean, was beginning to understand its true purpose. The device was not a weapon at all. It was something much more important and much more dangerous to those who feared what humanity might become. As the Council fleet prepared for its final assault on Earth, they had no idea that they were about to learn something about humanity. That would change their understanding of what it meant to be a civilized species. The death of Captain Amy Scott changed everything, though the Galactic Council did not understand it at first. News reporter Chris Bell stood in the ruins of what had been a children's hospital in Philadelphia, his voice steady despite the devastation around him. Behind him, hundreds of rescue workers from around the world dug through the rubble, searching for survivors. What we're witnessing here is not the response of a species preparing for war, Chris reported to his global audience. This is humanity, at its finest hour. Doctors from Japan are working alongside engineers from Brazil. Rescue teams from Canada are coordinating with volunteers from Nigeria. In the face of an attack we don't understand, from enemies we've never met, humanity has chosen to respond not with hatred, but with love. The broadcast was intercepted by the Council's monitoring systems and transmitted to War Commander Thekros. On his flagship, he watched the human reporter with growing confusion. The language patterns and emotional responses he was seeing bore no resemblance to anything in the Devourer historical records. Observer Zethkar, continue analysis of their behavioral patterns, Thekros ordered. I need to understand what we're dealing with here. On Earth, Dr. Jake Martinez was working around the clock to decode the alien beacon's transmissions. The device beneath the Pacific Ocean had become more active since the attacks began, pulsing with energy patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Working with linguist Dr. Kate Morgan, Jake was beginning to understand that the beacon was not just a communication device. It was something far more significant. Jake, I think I found something, Kate called from her workstation on the research. Vessel, the energy patterns aren't random. They're following linguistic structures, almost like a language made of pure energy. What is it saying? Jake asked. Kate studied her translations for a long moment before answering. It's a test, Jake. The beacon is some kind of ancient examination system. It enhances the dominant characteristics of any species that activates it. What kind of test? I think it's designed to determine whether a species is ready to join some kind of galactic community. The enhancements we've been experiencing, the cognitive improvements, the technological breakthroughs, they're amplifying what we already are at our core. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. And what are we at our core? Based on how humanity has responded to the attacks, Kate replied. We're a species that chooses cooperation over conflict, protection over aggression, and sacrifice over survival. While Jake and Kate worked to understand the beacon's purpose, the Council fleet was preparing for what they believed would be the final phase of their mission. War Commander Thekros had decided to destroy the source of what he still believed was Devourer technology, the beacon itself. All ships, target the ocean facility where the energy source is located, Thekros commanded. This will be a precision strike to eliminate their primary weapon before they can use it against the galaxy. But as the Council's most powerful weapons charged for the killing blow, they detected massive human activity around the beacon site. Thousands of ships had gathered above the location where Jake Martinez and his team were working. Aircraft filled the skies, and underwater vehicles surrounded the alien structure. To the Council, it looked like humanity was mobilizing to protect their most dangerous weapon. In reality, something much more profound was happening. When news of the alien attacks had spread around the world, Dr. Martinez had made a desperate announcement. He revealed the existence of the alien beacon and explained that it might be the key to communication with their attackers. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and ordinary citizens from every nation had responded to his call for help. They came not as soldiers preparing for war, but as representatives of humanity's greatest strength, the willingness to work together in the face of the impossible. Dr. Grace Miller arrived from Harvard with a team of xenobiologists. Roy Phillips brought his fusion drive technology and a group of aerospace engineers. Dr. Alan Price came with physicists from around the world. They were joined by thousands of others who had heard the call and decided that humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was too important to leave to governments and militaries. We have people from 200 countries down there. Lisa Thompson reported to Jake. They're not just scientists. We have teachers, farmers, factory workers, students, grandparents with their grandchildren. They all want to help. As the Council fleet moved closer to Earth for their final attack, they witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare and species behavior. The humans gathering around the beacon site were not building weapons or preparing for battle. They were sharing knowledge, combining their enhanced abilities, and working together to understand the alien technology. War Commander, Observer Zethkar reported, "I'm detecting massive collaborative activity among the humans. They appear to be pooling their intellectual resources." "For what purpose?" Thekros asked. "Unknown. But War Commander, the energy patterns suggest they're using the beacon to amplify their collective intelligence rather than their individual capabilities." This was something entirely outside the Council's experience. Every other species they had encountered used enhancement technology to increase individual power. The humans were using it to increase their ability to work together. The breakthrough came when 10,000 human minds, all enhanced by the beacon's energy, focused simultaneously on the problem of communication. Dr. Kate Morgan, working with linguists from every major university on Earth, finally decoded the beacon's true message. "Jake, you need to hear this," Kate announced over the ship's communication system. "The beacon isn't just a test. It's a welcome message. It's saying that humanity has passed the examination and is ready to join something called the Precursor." "Heritage. What does that mean?" Jake asked. "I think it means the species that built this beacon was waiting for us to prove we were worthy of their knowledge. The cognitive enhancements, the technological breakthroughs, they were never meant to be weapons. They were gifts given to species that demonstrate the right characteristics." "What characteristics?" Kate's voice was filled with wonder as she replied. "The willingness to sacrifice for others, the drive to cooperate rather than dominate, the choice to protect rather than destroy. Jake, the beacon has been testing every species in the galaxy for millions of years, and humanity is the first to pass." The implications of this discovery hit Jake like a physical blow. "If that's true, then the aliens attacking us ... They think we're something we're not," Kate finished. "They think we're monsters, when actually, we're exactly what the galaxy has been waiting for." As Jake processed this revelation, the Council fleet reached its firing position. War Commander Thekros prepared to give the order that would destroy the beacon and everyone around it. "All weapons locked on target," his weapons officer reported. "Fire when ready," Thekros commanded. But before the order could be carried out, something happened that would change the course of galactic history. One of the Council's interceptor craft, damaged by debris from their earlier attacks, lost power and crashed in the mountains of Montana. The alien pilot was severely injured and unconscious when his ship hit the ground. Farmer Pete Davis was checking his cattle when he saw the alien craft streak across the sky and crash in his back pasture. Any reasonable person would have called the authorities and stayed away from the potentially dangerous wreckage. Pete Davis was not just any reasonable person. He was a human being who had been enhanced by the beacon's energy. And humanity's greatest enhancement was not intelligence or strength. It was compassion. Pete grabbed his first aid kit and ran toward the crashed alien ship, even though he had no way of knowing whether the pilot was friend or enemy. He found the unconscious alien trapped in the wreckage and used his farming equipment to carefully extract the injured being. For the next 6 hours, Pete Davis, with help from his neighbors, who had heard about the crash, cared for an alien pilot whose species was trying to destroy humanity. They gave the wounded being water, treated his injuries as best they could, and stayed with him until he regained consciousness. When the alien pilot opened his eyes and saw humans caring for him instead of killing him, He experienced something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He realized that his people were about to commit the greatest mistake in galactic history. The alien pilot's name was Kextar, and he had been fighting in the Galactic Council's military forces for 30 years. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the destruction of entire species, and carried out orders that had saved the galaxy from countless threats. But as he looked up at the human faces surrounding him, he understood that he was about to become part of something terrible. Why? Kextar whispered in his own language, struggling to understand why these beings were helping him instead of torturing him for information about the fleet. Pete Davis could not understand the alien words, but he recognized the confusion and fear in the pilot's voice. "Easy there, friend," Pete said gently. "You're hurt pretty bad, but you're going to be okay. We're not going to hurt you." The universal translator built into Kextar's equipment converted Pete's words into something he could understand. The concept of an enemy showing mercy to a wounded opponent was so foreign to Kextar's military training that he wondered if he was hallucinating. "You should kill me," Kextar said, his translator making his words understandable to the humans. "I am part of the force that is destroying your world." Pete looked at his neighbors, Mary Lopez, who taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, Tony Rodriguez, who ran the auto repair shop in town, and Carol White, who had been a nurse before she retired. None of them looked like they were considering violence against the injured alien. "Well, that's a problem we'll have to work," Pete replied. "Right now, you're hurt and you need help. That's all that matters." High above, aboard the flagship Harmony's Edge, War Commander Thick Rouse was preparing to give the final order to destroy the beacon when his communications officer received an emergency transmission from the crashed interceptor. "War Commander, we're receiving a signal from pilot Kextar. He's alive, but he's requesting immediate cessation of all offensive operations." Thick Rouse paused, his hand hovering over the firing controls. "Put him through." Kextar's voice came across the communication channel, weak but urgent. "War Commander, we have made a terrible mistake. These beings are not devourers. They are something else entirely. They found me injured and dying, and instead of killing me, they saved my life. They are caring for me, even though they know I am part of the force attacking their world." "Pilot, you may be suffering from head trauma," Thick Rouse replied. "The humans are clearly using psychological warfare tactics to confuse you." "No, War Commander. I have been in combat for 30 years. I know the difference between enemy tactics and genuine compassion. These bangs are not trying to extract information from me. They are simply helping me because I am hurt. This is not the behavior of a species infected with devourer technology." Observer Zeth Carr, who had been monitoring the conversation, suddenly spoke up. "War Commander, I'm detecting massive changes in the energy patterns from the beacon. Humans have accomplished something." On Earth, Dr. Jake Martinez and Dr. Kate Morgan had finally achieved their breakthrough. Working with thousands of enhanced human minds, they had not only decoded the beacon's message, but had learned how to respond to it. The ancient device was now broadcasting a signal that could be understood by any civilization in the galaxy. "Jake, we did it," Kate announced to the assembled crowd of scientists and volunteers. "We're transmitting in perfect galactic standard. We can talk to them." Jake picked up the communication device that his team had rigged to work with the beacons. "Systems." His voice would now be heard by every ship in the Council fleet. "To the beings who are attacking our world," Jake began, "we understand that you are afraid of us. We understand that you believe we are something dangerous. But we want you to know that we are not your enemies. We are a young species that has much to learn about the galaxy, but we mean no harm to anyone." The transmission reached the Council fleet within seconds. Every alien aboard every ship heard Jake's words in their own language. translated perfectly by the beacon's ancient systems. "We know that you have lost members of your species to something called the Devourers," Jake continued. "We have learned about them from the beacon that your pilot crashed near. We are not those beings. We are something different. We are humans. And we want to join the galactic community as friends, not conquerors." War Commander Thickrose listened to the transmission with growing amazement. The human was speaking flawless galactic standard, something that should have been impossible for a species that had never made contact with other civilizations. "We have one of your people with us," Jake continued. "He was injured when his ship crashed, and our people have been caring for him. We want to return him to you safely, and we want to show you what we have learned about the beacon and its true purpose." At that moment, Observer Zithkar made a discovery that changed everything. "War Commander, I've been analyzing the beacon's energy signature more carefully. It's not Devourer technology at all. It's precursor technology. The precursors were legend among the galaxy's civilizations. They were the ancient species that had supposedly seeded the galaxy with intelligent life millions of years ago, then vanished without a trace. Most council members believed they were a myth. The beacon is a testing device," Zithkar continued, his voice filled with awe. "It's designed to evaluate developing species and determine whether they're ready to inherit precursor knowledge. War Commander, if the humans have activated a precursor beacon and passed its tests, then they're not a threat to the galaxy. They're the opposite." "Explain," Thickrose demanded. "The precursors were waiting for a species that would use advanced technology, not for conquest, but for cooperation. A species that would choose sacrifice over survival, protection over aggression. Based on everything we've observed about human behavior since the beacon activated, they may be exactly what the precursors were looking for." Thickrose felt something he had never experienced in 30 years of military service, doubt about a mission he had been certain was necessary. "Are you saying we've been trying to destroy the species the galaxy has been waiting for?" "I'm saying it's possible, War Commander. And if we're wrong about the humans, if we complete this mission and destroy them, we may be committing the greatest crime in galactic history." At that moment, another transmission came from Earth. This time, it was not Dr. Martinez speaking, but a collection of human voices, men, women, and children from around the world. "We know you're afraid," the voices said in unison, their words translated by the beacon into every language spoken in the galaxy. "We don't want to fight. We want to learn. We want to help. Please, let us help." The simple words carried something that no council member had expected to hear from a species they believed was infected with devourer technology, genuine compassion, offered freely to those who had been trying to destroy them. Chancellor Morbius, monitoring the situation from the council chambers, made the decision that would define the next era of galactic civilization. "War Commander Thickrose, stand down all offensive operations immediately. We are going to make contact with the humans." "Yes, Chancellor." As the council fleet powered down its weapons, War Commander Thickrose opened a communication channel to Earth. "This is War Commander Thickrose of the Galactic Council Fleet. We request permission to retrieve our injured pilot and to establish formal diplomatic contact with your species." Dr. Jake Martinez, still standing beside the beacon that had started everything, smiled as he replied, "Permission granted, War Commander. Welcome to Earth." 3 months later, the Galactic Council Chambers hosted their newest member, Dr. Jake Martinez, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, stood before representatives of 12 alien civilizations and delivered humanity's first formal address to the galaxy. "We never invaded Earth," Jake said, his words carrying to every corner of the galaxy through the Council's communication networks. "Earth was preparing us to join you. The beacon, the enhancements, the tests we faced, they were all designed to show us what we could become when we choose cooperation over conflict, when we choose to protect rather than destroy. He paused, looking at the alien faces around him, some friendly, some still uncertain, all listening. "Now we're here to help," Jake continued. "We're here to be the species that the precursors hoped we could become. We're here to serve as guardians for developing civilizations, to offer them the same guidance and protection that we wish we had received." In the audience, War Commander Thekros listened to the human ambassador and reflected on how close they had come to destroying the very beings who might save the galaxy from making the same mistakes that had led to countless wars and conflicts. The galaxy had feared that Earth was being invaded by destroyers. Instead, Earth had been preparing protectors. And now, for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy had hoped that the dream of the precursors, a civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest, might finally be achieved. As Jake concluded his address, he repeated the words that had stopped a war and begun a new age. "We're here to help." The Galactic Council had been watching Earth in horror, believing they were witnessing the birth of their greatest enemy. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of their greatest hope.